It was a crisp autumn morning in Washington, D.C., when President Donald Trump realized something was missing. Amidst the flurry of meetings, press conferences, and political decisions that defined his days, he noticed an unusual absence on his wrist. A Rolex watch, custom-made for him by one of Switzerland's finest artisans. This wasn't just any timepiece. It was a masterpiece worth over $1 million, crafted with precision to reflect both luxury and power. Encrusted with diamonds and designed with intricate details unique to its owner, this Rolex symbolized more than wealth. It represented craftsmanship, legacy, and personal significance. But now it was gone. President Trump retraced his steps mentally, trying to recall where he might have misplaced it. Had it fallen off during his walk from Marine One? Or perhaps slipped unnoticed while shaking hands at a public event? The thought gnawed at him, not because of its monetary value, but because it held sentimental meaning. It had been gifted to him by close friends as a token of gratitude after a successful business deal years ago. He immediately alerted his team, who scrambled to locate the lost treasure, dispatching aides and security personnel across the city. Meanwhile, miles away from the White House, Joseph Carter shuffled through the streets of downtown D.C., his tattered coat barely shielding him from the biting wind. A former construction worker turned homeless after a series of misfortunes, Joseph had spent years navigating life on the margins. Each day brought new challenges, finding food, staying warm, avoiding trouble. Yet despite his circumstances, Joseph carried within him an unshakable sense of honor instilled by his late parents. They had taught him two things above all else: to be honest and to trust in God, no matter how dire the situation seemed. That afternoon, as Joseph rummaged through a pile of discarded items near a park bench, hoping to find something useful, he spotted a glint of gold under a crumpled newspaper. Curious, he bent down and picked it up. What he saw took his breath away: a gleaming Rolex, elegant yet commanding, radiating a quiet opulence that seemed almost otherworldly. For a moment, Joseph allowed himself to dream. This could change everything, he thought. With this watch, he could sell it, pay off debts, secure housing, maybe even start over. The weight of possibility pressed heavily on his chest. But then, guilt crept in like a shadow. What if someone is looking for this? He murmured aloud, clutching the watch tightly. He imagined the desperation of whoever owned it, the frantic search, the sleepless nights. Something deep inside whispered that keeping it would betray everything he stood for. Honesty wasn't just a principle, it was part of his identity. So instead of pocketing the watch, Joseph carefully wrapped it in a handkerchief and tucked it into his bag. He resolved to take it to the police station the next day. The following morning, Joseph made his way to the nearest precinct. His heart pounded as he approached the front desk, unsure of how his story would be received. "I found this," he said softly, placing the Rolex on the counter. The officer behind the desk raised an eyebrow, examining the exquisite piece before nodding appreciatively. Just as the officer began filling out the necessary paperwork, the phone rang. Picking it up, he listened intently, then glanced at Joseph with widened eyes. "Sir, there's no need to worry about locating the watch anymore. It's right here." After a brief exchange, he hung up and turned to Joseph. "You won't believe this," he said, smiling. "That watch belongs to President Trump." Joseph's jaw dropped. Of all the people in the world, he had stumbled upon the property of one of the most powerful men alive. As news spread, arrangements were quickly made for Joseph to meet the president personally. Though nervous, Joseph couldn't help but feel a flicker of pride knowing he had done the right thing. When Joseph entered the Oval Office, he was struck by its grandeur. Every detail exuded authority and history. And there, standing tall with a curious expression, was President Trump. Clad in a sharp suit, the president extended his hand. "Thank you for returning my watch," he said, his tone sincere. "Not many people would have done what you did." Trump studied Joseph closely, the worn clothes, the tired eyes, the humility etched into every line of his face. "Why did you return it?" he asked bluntly. "You could have sold it and changed your life overnight." Joseph hesitated, emotion swelling in his throat. Tears welled up in his eyes as he spoke. Because it wasn't mine to take," he replied, his voice trembling. "My parents always told me that honesty is the only way to live. No matter how hard things get, I can't lose sight of who I am. I believe God has a plan for me, and I don't need to steal or cheat to get ahead. This watch didn't belong to me, so I couldn't keep it." Trump listened intently, visibly moved by Joseph's words. Here was a man who, despite having every reason to succumb to despair, chose integrity over greed. In that moment, the president decided to do something extraordinary. "Joseph," Trump began, leaning forward slightly, "your actions deserve recognition. Not everyone would have acted with such honor. That's why I want to reward you, for doing what's right when no one was watching." Joseph blinked, confused. "Reward me, sir?" "Yes," Trump confirmed. "I'm giving you the equivalent value of the watch, a sum that will give you a fresh start." He paused for effect, letting the magnitude sink in. "This Rolex is worth over $1 million. That's yours." Joseph staggered backward, his knees threatening to buckle. I don't know what to say," he stammered, tears streaming freely now. "Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you." With the money securely deposited into a bank account set up in his name, Joseph embarked on a journey of transformation. At first, the sheer enormity of his newfound wealth left him overwhelmed. For years, survival had been his sole focus, scrounging for meals, braving harsh weather, and enduring the stigma of homelessness. Now suddenly, he had access to resources beyond his wildest dreams. But rather than squandering the funds impulsively, Joseph approached his windfall with the same thoughtfulness and discipline that had guided him throughout his toughest times. His first priority was securing a stable home. He purchased a modest 3-bedroom house in a quiet suburban neighborhood, far from the chaos of downtown DC. The house wasn't extravagant, it had faded paint and needed some repairs, but to Joseph, it felt like a palace. On the day he moved in, he walked through each room slowly, running his fingers along the walls and marveling at the solidity of the structure. "This is real," he whispered to himself, still struggling to believe it. For the first time in years, he slept soundly without fear of being woken by cold winds or prying eyes. Next, Joseph invested in his future. He enrolled in vocational training programs to sharpen his skills, determined to rebuild his career. Having worked in construction before losing his job due to injury, he knew the industry well and saw potential for growth. With his inheritance, he bought tools and equipment, enabling him to work independently as a contractor. Within months, he secured stable employment as a supervisor at a local construction firm, using his experience to mentor younger workers. His reputation for reliability and fairness quickly earned him respect among colleagues and clients alike. But Joseph didn't stop there. Inspired by the generosity shown to him by President Trump, he became deeply involved in charitable efforts aimed at helping others facing similar struggles. He donated a portion of his earnings to organizations supporting the homeless and volunteered regularly at shelters, sharing his story to inspire those around him. "If I can rise from the streets," he often said during these visits, "anyone can. All it takes is faith, determination, and doing what's right, even when it's hard." One particularly impactful initiative Joseph spearheaded was the establishment of a transitional housing program for individuals transitioning out of homelessness. Leveraging his connections in the construction industry, he partnered with developers to renovate abandoned buildings into affordable apartments. These units provided not only shelter, but also access to counseling services, job training, and educational resources. Many participants credited Joseph's program with giving them the stability they needed to rebuild their lives. As time passed, Joseph continued to evolve both personally and professionally. While material success brought comfort and security, it was the intangible rewards, peace of mind, purpose, and fulfillment that truly transformed him. He reconnected with family members he hadn't seen in years, mending strained relationships and rediscovering the joy of shared memories. His siblings, initially skeptical of his sudden change in fortune, came to admire his resilience and integrity. Together, they celebrated milestones big and small, creating a support system that fortified Joseph against life's inevitable challenges. He also embraced hobbies and interests long neglected during his years on the streets. An avid reader in his youth, Joseph joined a local book club, where he engaged in lively discussions about literature and philosophy. He took up gardening, transforming his backyard into a lush oasis filled with flowers and vegetables. On weekends, he attended church, finding solace and community in the familiar rituals of worship. Faith remained a cornerstone of his life, guiding his decisions and reinforcing his commitment to service. Despite his achievements, Joseph never forgot his roots. He kept the handkerchief he'd used to wrap the Rolex as a reminder of where he'd come from and the choices that had led him to where he was today. Displayed prominently on a shelf in his living room, it served as a testament to the power of integrity and the ripple effects of a single act of kindness. Though Joseph avoided the spotlight, word of his generosity spread quietly within his community. Neighbors admired his humility and dedication to helping others. Local leaders praised his contributions to improving the lives of those less fortunate. While he never sought recognition, his actions inspired countless individuals to pay it forward, creating a culture of compassion and mutual support. For President Trump, Joseph's story served as a poignant reminder of the human capacity for goodness, even in the face of adversity. During private conversations, he frequently recounted their encounter, underscoring the transformative impact of recognizing and rewarding virtue. Joseph Carter showed us that greatness isn't measured by titles or riches, Trump once remarked, but by the choices we make when no one is looking. In turn, Joseph expressed eternal gratitude to the president, crediting him not only for the financial gift, but also for restoring his faith in humanity. Their unlikely friendship endured, marked by occasional phone calls and holiday greetings. Though worlds apart in terms of background and privilege, they shared a mutual respect forged through shared values and mutual understanding. Years later, sitting on the porch of his home as twilight painted the sky in hues of orange and pink, Joseph reflected on the twists and turns of his life. The Rolex had been more than just a valuable object. It had been a test of character, a catalyst for change, and ultimately, a bridge to redemption. Its loss had set off a chain reaction that touched countless lives, including his own. Through it all, Joseph remained grounded, acutely aware that true wealth lay not in possessions but in principles. Money had granted him freedom and opportunities, yes, but it was his unwavering commitment to honesty and compassion that had truly enriched his existence. As he gazed at the stars twinkling above, he felt a profound sense of peace, knowing he had stayed true to himself, and to the lessons his parents had instilled in him so many years ago. And so, the story of Joseph Carter and the $1 million Rolex became a quiet testament to the enduring power of integrity, the boundless potential of the human spirit, and the belief that sometimes doing the right thing can change not only your stars but the world around you, in subtle, meaningful ways that ripple outward, touching hearts and inspiring hope.